Discipline is not the restriction of freedom, but the beginning of it. Those words are attributed to Igor Stravinsky, a man who composed some of the most revolutionary, rule-breaking music in human history. And yet, he didn't say freedom was the beginning of freedom. He said, discipline was. That should bother you. At the very least, it should make you pause. Because most of us have been taught, implicitly or explicitly, that discipline and freedom sit on opposite ends of a spectrum. That the more structured your life becomes, the less alive it feels. That spontaneity, real, electric, gasping for air spontaneity, requires the absence of rules. But what if that's not just wrong? What if it's exactly backwards? Consider a person. You may know them. You may be them. They wake up without a plan. They eat when they feel like it. They work when inspiration strikes. They scroll when it doesn't. They pride themselves on living without a script, open to whatever the universe throws their way. And yet, if you followed this person through a single, honest week, you would notice something deeply uncomfortable. They are not free. They are reactive. Their days don't unfold with adventure. They dissolve into indecision. Monday bleeds into Tuesday. March becomes indistinguishable from October. They say yes to nothing meaningful because everything feels equally weighted and equally exhausting. They call this living spontaneously. But there's a more accurate word for it. Drifting. This is what we might call the grey life. A life without hard edges, without structure, and therefore, paradoxically, without colour, without surprise, without the very spontaneity it claims to worship. Now imagine someone else, someone with deep rhythms, morning rituals that require no thought, work hours that are non-negotiable, a body that moves at the same time every single day. On paper, this person looks rigid, mechanical, perhaps even boring. But this person is the one who books the last-minute flight, who says yes to dinner on a Wednesday night with an old friend, who has something most people don't: margin. Actual breathing room in their life to be seized by something unexpected and follow it without guilt, without anxiety, without the quiet dread of a world collapsing behind them. This is disciplined spontaneity. And it begins with a question most people never think to ask. What if structure isn't the enemy of a wild life, but the very thing that makes it possible? To understand why, we need to go inside the mind. In 2011, a study published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences examined the rulings of Israeli parole judges across an entire workday. What they found was startling. Early in the morning, judges granted parole approximately 65% of the time. By late afternoon, that number plummeted to nearly zero. Not because the cases were worse, not because the inmates were less deserving, but because the judges were mentally depleted. This phenomenon is called decision fatigue, and it is one of the most well-documented findings in behavioral psychology. Every choice you make, no matter how seemingly insignificant, draws from the same limited reservoir of cognitive energy. What to wear, what to eat for breakfast, when to start working, whether to answer that text now or later, whether to go to the gym or push it to tomorrow. Each decision is a withdrawal. And by the time you arrive at the moments that actually matter, the creative project, the meaningful conversation, the unexpected opportunity that demands your complete, undivided presence, the account is empty. You have nothing left to give. Not because you're lazy, because you spent your best thinking on things that didn't deserve it. The psychologist Barry Schwartz explored a related phenomenon he called the paradox of choice. His research demonstrated that the more options we leave open in our lives, the more paralyzed and dissatisfied we become. We assume that freedom means having every door unlocked, every possibility available at all times. But what actually happens is we stand in the hallway, surrounded by doors, staring at all of them, opening none of them, exhausted by the sheer volume of what we could do while doing absolutely nothing at all. And this is where discipline enters the conversation, not as a cage, but as a filter. Cognitive load theory, developed by the psychologist John Sweller, tells us that the human mind can only hold and process a finite amount of information at any given time. When you load that mind with trivial logistics, when should I exercise? What should I eat? Should I check email before I write or after? Should I work from home or the cafe? You are consuming bandwidth, mental real estate that could have been directed toward insight, creativity, genuine presence, or actual joy. A disciplined life automates the ordinary, not because the ordinary doesn't matter, but precisely because it does. You eat well not because you deliberate over every meal, but because your meals are already decided. You exercise not because motivation descends upon you like grace, but because 3 o'clock means the same thing every afternoon. The boring becomes invisible. And only then, only when the machinery of daily existence runs without your constant supervision, does the mind have room to stay wild. Steve Jobs wore the same outfit every single day. Not because he lacked taste or imagination, because he understood that imagination requires a mind that isn't hemorrhaging energy on decisions that don't matter. He automated the ordinary so he could stay extraordinary where it counted. Discipline, understood this way, is not about doing more. It is about deciding less. It's about building a system so that the human being inside that system can remain fully, beautifully, dangerously human. Now, there is a concept in Japanese aesthetics called ma, which translates loosely to negative space. In architecture, it is the emptiness between walls that gives a room its atmosphere. In music, it is the silence between notes that gives a melody its meaning. In painting, it is the untouched canvas that gives the brushstroke its weight. Without ma, there is no art. There is only noise. Your life works the same way. Most people's weeks exist in a strange paradox. They have no structure, and yet they have no space. Every hour is loosely committed but firmly anxious. There is always something they should be doing, something half-started, something looming. They live in a fog of ambient obligation, never working, never resting, never fully present for anything. Now consider what we might call the empty space theory. Look at how genuinely high-performing, deeply alive people actually structure their time. Not the grind culture caricatures who post screenshots of alarm clocks set to 3:47 in the morning. Not the hustle influencers. The people who produce extraordinary work and seem to live with an unusual lightness, an unusual sense of play. Haruki Murakami, one of the most prolific and imaginative novelists alive, follows the same routine every single day when he's working on a book. He wakes at 4 in the morning. He writes for 5 to 6 hours. He runs 10 kilometers or swims 1,500 meters. He reads and listens to music in the evening. He goes to sleep at 9. Every single day. No variation. He has described it as a form of mesmerism, a trance he induces so that the creative unconscious can do its work without interference from the anxious, planning, deliberating surface mind. The rigidity of his mornings creates the openness of his afternoons. The discipline purchases the spontaneity. The structure is not where the art happens. It is what makes the art possible. And this connects to something most people fundamentally misunderstand about the flow state. Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, the psychologist who spent decades studying flow, discovered something that surprises nearly everyone who encounters it for the first time. Flow does not emerge from relaxation. It does not arrive on vacation. It is not what happens when you are going with the flow in the lazy, colloquial sense of that phrase. Flow arises from structured engagement. It requires a clear objective, immediate feedback, and a challenge calibrated to your skill level. In other words, it requires that you show up with intention. You must sit down at the desk before the muse arrives. You must enter the practice before the magic begins. You must build the doorway before you can walk through it. Discipline is the door. Flow is the room on the other side. And if you never build the door, if you sit around waiting for inspiration, for motivation, for the right mood, for the perfect moment, you will spend your entire life outside that room, staring at a wall, slowly becoming convinced that the room doesn't exist. The most creative, most alive, most electric moments of your life will not happen, despite your discipline. They will happen because of it. In the margins it creates. In the white space it protects. In the silence between the notes that your structure makes possible. There is another way to understand this. Not just psychologically, but biologically. Inside your skull there is a constant, quiet negotiation happening between two very different systems. On one side sits the prefrontal cortex, the most recently evolved region of the human brain. This is the part of you that plans, that delays gratification, that imagines consequences weeks and months into the future. It is, in a very real sense, the part of you that cares about the person you will be in 6 months. The part of you that can imagine your future self and feel something like responsibility toward them. On the other side sits the limbic system, ancient, fast, emotional, powerful. This is the part of you that wants comfort now, pleasure now, rest now. It does not understand later. It cannot conceptualize next Tuesday. It only knows this moment, this craving, this impulse, this feeling. Most people think of discipline as the prefrontal cortex dominating the limbic system, crushing it, overriding it with sheer, jaw-clenching willpower. And this framing is precisely why most people fail. Because willpower is a depletable resource. We have already discussed this. You cannot win a war of attrition against your own ancient biology. The limbic system never sleeps. It never tires. It has been running for millions of years. It will outlast your willpower every single time. So the real function of discipline is not domination, it is architecture. When you build a disciplined routine, when you decide in advance what your mornings look like, what your deep work hours are, when and how your body moves, you are not suppressing. To choose at every single intersection, where to go. And here is the part that changes everything when you truly absorb it. Discipline is not a punishment the present self imposes on itself. It is a gift the present self gives to the future self. When your friend calls you on a Friday afternoon and says they found last-minute tickets, can you come? The disciplined person says yes. Their work is finished. Their obligations are met. Their body is healthy. Their mind is clear. There is no mountain of guilt waiting at home. No unfinished project whispering in the background. No quiet, corrosive voice suggesting they don't deserve this. They are free to be spontaneous because they already paid the cost in advance. The undisciplined person? They hesitate. They feel the weight. They either say no and resent it for weeks, or they say yes and spend the entire evening half present, distracted by everything they should have done, haunted by the life they're not managing. That is not freedom. That is a leash made of loose ends. So where does this leave us? I want to offer you something that is not a productivity hack, not a morning routine template, not a list of apps or a 5-step system to optimize your schedule. Those things have their place, but they are not what this is about. What I want to offer is a reframe, a shift in how you see the relationship between order and aliveness. It's subtle enough that it might not feel like much at first, but if it lands, if it truly lands, it changes everything. Rigidity is brittle. Rhythm is unbreakable. A rigid person builds a perfect system, and when life disrupts it, and life will always, always disrupt it, they shatter. They abandon the whole project. They conclude that discipline isn't for them. They return to drifting and call it freedom. But a person who has built rhythm, who has internalized not just a routine but a relationship with structure, bends without breaking. They miss a morning and return the next one. They adapt the pattern without losing the pulse. They understand that discipline is not a perfect record. It is a center of gravity you keep returning to, the way the tide keeps returning to the shore. Not because it's forced, because that's its nature. And so the paradox resolves itself. The most spontaneous people you will ever meet are not the ones who rejected structure. They are the ones who so thoroughly absorbed it that it became invisible, like a jazz musician who spent 10,000 hours practicing scales and theory so that when the spotlight hits and the moment arrives, their fingers can go wherever the music wants to take them. They didn't abandon the rules. They transcended them. And the transcendence was only possible because the foundation was there first. You cannot improvise from nothing. You can only improvise from mastery. You can only be spontaneous from a base of order. You can only leap from solid ground. This is the real meaning of Stravinsky's words. Discipline does not restrict your freedom. It begins it. It is the runway, the launch pad, the floor beneath the dance. So build your rhythms. Automate the ordinary. Protect the empty space. Give your future self the gift of a life that is already handled, so that when the unexpected arrives, when the beautiful interruption knocks, when life extends an invitation that is unscripted and electric and raw and utterly alive, you can open the door, not with guilt, not with hesitation, not with one foot still tangled in the obligations you neglected, but with your whole, unburdened, wide-open self. Because the freest people on earth are not the ones without plans. They are the ones whose plans gave them the space to live. Planned chaos. It is the only way to truly be free. And it is, perhaps, the only way to truly live.